Majita Dinsa, back again. This time we're reacting to the Starlink saga, and we're just gonna see Nhlamulo Ndhlela put on a masterclass of just exposing crucial intelligence that South Africans need to be aware of. You know, it's become apparent to me that the more I speak to South African blacks, the more I realize that they have no idea what's actually going on. We are in the middle of a digital capture, a state capture. I mean, the state was always captured because the apartheid government never gave up any economic power. They didn't give up any land or wealth. And we were promised by the ANC that we would get these things back, which was a complete and utter lie. Now we find ourselves back to square one, exactly where we were during apartheid, with no power, and all we can offer is our labor. And when I hear Black South Africans crying for the unemployment issue to be resolved through creating jobs, I just cringe, because I think to myself, that's not what our ancestors died for. They didn't die for us to continue to be labor in our own homeland. They died so that we can reclaim our land and reclaim everything that belongs to us. And everybody was so excited with the whole Rainbow Nation narrative and the Rainbow Nation propaganda that was spread around, and then Mandela being glorified as a hero when he was actually a sellout. This is why white people love Mandela so much, because he's allowed them to get away with stealing from us. And I know that's hard to hear for some of you, but that's the truth. And so we do have progressive parties that are actually pushing and trying to expose the truth to the general public so that we're all aware of what's going on in the country. But it also takes you one thing to know and one thing to confirm these things and one thing to do your own research. If you live in a bubble and you're not exposed to these things, you won't understand how critical the moment is right now in South Africa. And we need all South Africans to rise up and to fight and defend their country. Because if you don't, this will be the end of South Africa as we know it. We're headed towards a country that is not familiar to us, a country that we don't recognize anymore. And it's scary because before, at least, we had a revolutionary-minded South Africa and youth that were conscientized and were willing to take the streets and willing to take arms and put themselves in the front lines of the battlefield to make sure that we can protect and preserve the land of our ancestors. But now, these deconscientized Black South Africans, these Negro-peons that purely care about capital, only money and nothing else, are happy just to get employment instead of getting their own land and building the country from scratch. Just like Zimbabweans are running away, just like Nigerians are running away. All these African countries that got independence, they don't want to do the work. They want to go to where pastures are greener instead of turning their own pastures green. And it's a shame that that's what we become as Africans. But South Africa, this does not have to be our story. We must rise up against the government. We must do something. And you know what I mean by do something, because we cannot allow this to continue. Elections are not going to change anything, guys. You cannot have a bloodless revolution. You cannot have a peaceful revolution. That's not a real revolution. It's a fake one. And we have lived through a fake revolution, and it's time for us to stand up and gain and take back our land. We cannot ask anymore. We can't be pleading. We can't have Ramaphosa as our representative. It's embarrassing because he does not represent the way South Africans are. It's shameful. We must go back to being revolutionaries and fighting for what's ours. So anyway, let's go to this video and let's watch as Ndhlela and Nhlamulo Ndhlela breaks down some intelligence, crucial intelligence. Please share this video with everybody that you know. And guys, sorry, the sound is not good from the NKP.
Yo, comrades, for a second I thought I was in my Peter Stadium. That I'm in the Western Cape. I think this is a confirmation that indeed our election was rigged. Oh, Ndamanga. It's a clear indication, because the resounding spirit that's here is a clear confirmation that Mkhonto was actually bigger in the Western Cape than most people think they are. There's no doubt about that. But I think I've been given an opportunity, if you give me some time. You know, I've been doing my own assessment on what's been happening, firstly within this country. And you know what's special about Western Cape is that this is where, finally enough, let's be honest, our problem started. Our problem started in this province when the Dromedaries, the Recheg, the Goede Hoop came here, you know, and they were passing through the trade corridor. Yeah? In as much as they converted Robben Island into a prison. It was actually their trading platform where all the ships would stop and then they'd be trading over there. But even the history tells us a lot about why the Western Cape is so important for these white monopoly capital, neoliberal colonialists today. It is because it is the heart of global trade. All ships from everywhere, whether it's south, or east and west, they all go past these shores here. And that is why, and I actually asked someone at one point, Commander, I said, why is it that the Western Cape, when it's the most southern point of, I refer to the Western Cape, has it maybe got to do with something related to the West or the interest of the West? Because it is the most southern point of Africa. So why are we referring to it as the Western Cape? Or the Cape Colony in the West? Oh. Hey, this English sometimes. But the campus shows me bottom being south and west being elsewhere, right? But I get your point of Cape Colony. But for me, it then resonated with a number of issues to say, we as Mkhonto Wesizwe, being the only party that actually recognizes the kings, the queens, the originators of the land, the Khoi and San people, is a clear indication that Mkhonto is a spiritual party. It is a spiritual party. It is our ancestors' reincarnation. It's a reincarnation process that we are going through, where our ancestors are living through us. And I actually went to the point of saying that every single person that voted for Mkhonto is because their ancestors are voting through them. Every single person that voted from Mkhonto Wesizwe, it's not you that voted, it's actually your ancestor that voted. And there's no ways that Stephen Hazen has got as many ancestors as us. It can't be. Numerically, just numerically, there's more black ancestors than there is white ancestors. So how is it possible that we find ourselves not governing today? And you can tell with what has transpired in the past couple of days. When I presided over my first meeting as a member of the Portfolio Committee of Communications, Solly Malati, who is a DA minister, he was the spokesperson during elections of the DA. And I said to him, I find it strange that the president will make you the Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies. And let me tell you why, comrades, I say that. Because Portfolio Committee of the Department of Digital Communications and Digital Technologies and Communications doesn't have to do with communications in the way we do it within the past. It's got to do with technology. You've got Post Office there. You've got SETA, which is the State Information Technology Agency. You've got Telkom. You've got ICASA. You've got all these very key entities that are critical, especially because now we're getting into a knowledge economy. In order for us to participate globally, we have to be part of the knowledge economy, right? And in order for you to participate in the global economy, you need technological intervention, digitization. And all of that happens under a DA minister. In the world of cybercrime, remember, sovereignty today is based on your ability to protect yourself technologically. That's the new warfare, cybercrime, cyber warfare. But yet, you then find a president such as ours who says he's patriotic. He goes and gives that portfolio to a party that whenever there's issues in the country, the first country they go and default for assistance is the West. The West who technologically are advanced, the West who know how to manipulate systems, because in most cases, the platforms and the technologies that we use are theirs, right? So you then ask yourself, and I even said to him, Minister, I want to ask you, and it concerns me that the president would make you the Minister of Communications, for you to preside over State Information Technology Agency. Now, the State Information Technology Agency carries all the systems of government: Home Affairs, South African Police, Defense, Intelligence, every single. In actual fact, if you look at the CETA Act, the CETA Act is enacted by National Intelligence, which was NIA at the time, the National Intelligence Act, the South African Police Act, and the Defense Act. That led to the establishment of the State Information Technology Agency. And from the time at which I actually used to interact with the State Information Technology, at the time when I was selling into government, the one thing about it is that you had to go or undergo a vetting process before you can even work there. Today, it's questionable as to whether the people that are actually working there have actually been vetted. That's the one thing. And if you look at how CETA has been destabilized, it tells you a lot that they don't want it to function. Which then leads me to something which was interesting, because everything, if you do a proper observation, everything happens for a reason. You see, these people, these colonialists, these neoliberal thinkers, they always have an agenda. And you must never ever, I always ask myself, I said, whenever they do anything, whatever you see in the media from the DA, whatever program, ask yourself why. Always ask yourself why. And I said, that's the difference between, I believe, politicians today versus the heroes that we know. And that's what brought about consciousness then. They would always ask the question, why? You are with this person. You're laughing with this white man. Why are you laughing with this white man? Why would a Johan Rupert feel so comfortable to be in the Oval Office and stand and talk on your behalf as though they were the president when they're not even a member of parliament? Why? So I then get back to the issue of Home Affairs. Home Affairs, that minister in 2018, he wrote a book in 2018. Remember at the time, and you can go and check. See, there's one thing about me, I put things as they are. Because it's about time that we conscientize ourselves and we awaken to what's happening. In 2018, already the DA was engaging with Ramaphosa himself and the ANC on the side, right? And at that point in time, they were already planning what we see today as a coalition government. They can't say they're having a coalition government because of Mkhonto we Sizwe. No, it's a lie. Mkhonto we Sizwe only emerged in 2023. They were already discussing this thing in 2018. Then already. To a point where the minister today of Home Affairs, being a DA MP, he wrote a book that spoke to coalition governments in 2018. And in that book, he also speaks about electoral reforms, right? Meaning e-voting, right? So he wrote it then. So clearly, Leon Sheba must go and check. He's a Sangoma, because he could tell that he's going to be a Minister of Home Affairs and preside over electoral reform, which is what's happening today. You know, at the beginning of the year, when we had the State of the Nation address, Ramaphosa, Mr. Ramaphosa, in his State of the Nation address, he talks about digital identities and digitizing identities. And immediately I was sitting next to Commander Grenade and the chief whip and the party leader. And I immediately whispered to them and I said, can I tell you what's happening? And they said, what do you think? I said, you'll see what's going to happen next. They're going to be talking about e-voting. This was at the beginning of the year when I mentioned this. Guess what? What did they institute? E-voting. Right? And let me tell you, comrades, they are instituting e-voting because they've realized that they have reached reached the end of the road. There are no more tricks. Mkhonto Wesizwe is here. And we have seen through. We have seen through their tactics. It is not going to fly anymore. That's just the reality of what's happened. So the best way to then do it is to introduce digitizing identities, ensure that you now activate e-voting so that you have a platform that you can use for people to vote with their digital identities. Now, if they couldn't handle elections with a hybrid system, meaning you vote on paper, then it gets captured, and then the screens go down for a couple of hours, and then MK, instead of getting two-thirds majority, gets 14%. That in of itself is telling. It is a confirmation of their strategy, and we need to catch on to this very quickly. Because the same Minister of Home Affairs of the DA then makes a submission to say that they don't want SITA, which is the State Information Technology Agency, to host the National Population Registry anymore, the system. Now that it must be managed by a private company. Because now they're saying that SITA is inefficient and is not delivering according to the service level agreement that they have with them. It's a lie. Because don't forget what happens on the other side. The minister who presides over SITA himself is sabotaging SITA. He changed boards twice ever since he's been there. I'll give you another example. I presided over this matter in communications. A contract for 1.2 billion rand for education in the Western Cape, Department of Education in the Western Cape, 1.2 billion rand, was being facilitated via SITA. It was found to be irregular. But let me tell you, if you look at what has happened, they have regularized it. 1.2 billion rand. The minister had an opportunity to intervene. The minister never intervened. Because you know why? If you look at the company that's getting the contract here in the Western Cape, it's an Afrikaner company. So if that is not a way to fund your programs in the Western Cape and to fund the DA, I don't know what else could be. You know, we're not kids here. You can see what's happening. Now, that is SITA and Home Affairs. And these are the two departments we have to focus on. I can tell you now. We have to focus on those departments. Because even the Starlink transaction, you see, let's look at Starlink. Who's the shareholder who was known to be a shareholder of MTN? Ramaphosa. Yes. Right? Who's the chairperson of MTN? Mkabis. Jonas. Right? And now Ramaphosa wanted to send Mkabis Jonas to the US as a special envoy before this meeting. You ask yourself, especially, I'm sure you guys have seen the video, Mkabis Jonas, where he said worse things than the outgoing, the recent ambassador. He said worse things about the administration. He said worse things, right? But Ramaphosa felt comfortable enough and confident enough to send him as the chairperson of his company. And when you do a proper assessment, you then realize that no, the reason he sent him is because the one guy who's got control there in the West, who's a South African billionaire staying there, who controls this Starlink company, yes, is actually got a relationship with MTN. As we speak, MTN has got an agreement that they've signed with Starlink, where they are currently rolling out that technology in Nigeria. So this is not by chance that these individuals are connected in this way, or what is happening the way it is. It's not. There is a bigger play and a big agenda here. Then if you look at how they're now trying to use the farm killings, is what they refer to, the genocide. So they go there now and they create this impression and this huge negative narrative that farmers are being killed here in the Western Cape and maybe other provinces, but they focus here because remember, they're all here, right? They go there and they say, by the way, during Zuma's time, Zuma, he stopped the drone implementation, because he felt that there was going to be espionage and collecting of data. Total lie. Total lie. What then happens is the following. If you listen to them properly, they use the farm killings or so-called genocide as a basis in a business case for them to bring in Starlink. To say, no, the only way we can solve our crime problem is because we can bring in Starlink. And Starlink has got the reach to the rural areas. Please, man. How many people from the DA went when a woman was being mauled in Santa Cruz on a racist farmer's farm by 2 pit bulls? How many? None of them. Did they ever talk about that? You'll never hear them. A child in Saldana, a farmer drove over a child for picking up an orange on the floor, on the ground. Do you ever hear the DA saying anything about that? No. What happened now? Boomerang, the employees. Do you ever hear the DA say anything about that? No. If you look at the stats that were presented by the Minister of Police today, out of 12 farmers that we killed, only 2 were white, the rest were black. But now they want to drive the narrative and then create an impression as though the only way to solve our problems in this country is by bringing Starlink. And then immediately after that trip, like what I told you earlier, now the Minister of Communications wants this thing gazetted to say that Starlink can be brought into the country without a 30% BEE cut for one company. That, by the way, is going to be collecting data from all of us. Because you see, the best way in most cases, if they were to come in legitimately and their intention was to advance this country, there'd be another level whereby they say there must be black-owned companies that will contract with us, and those companies collect the data from us. Then those companies connect to the satellite. That's a different story. But we can't have a situation where that satellite is going to connect directly to you and collect your information in terms of where you move and how you behave with the internet and how you interact. That questions our sovereignty. That questions, like I said, in the cyber security and the cyber world that we live in, a number of issues. So I felt it's important that I highlight what is actually happening here. What they are wanting to do, bring about digitization of the identity, bring e-voting, rig the elections, make sure there's connectivity right up to the rural areas so that when they digitize, people can vote online and then they can rig the elections nicely come 2029. In actual fact, they won't even wait for 2029 as the way they're moving. They want to do it now for local elections. So all I'm saying, comrades, we can't let this situation perpetuate itself in the way and unfold the way it is. We need to make noise about it. We need to fight it with
Yeah, guys. So, hmm, hold on, just a second. Uh, yeah, guys. So, Liponets Kamakalona, uh, we've heard the analysis, and there's nothing more to say, really. It's clear as day. And yeah, like we say, guys, we must do something about this. We cannot allow the work of our ancestors to go down the drain. So I'm pleading with everyone, please care about your country, care about your people, care about Black South Africans. Because what we're seeing here is a result of Black South Africans not caring about other Black South Africans. So we're watching the country go down the drain, and nobody cares to fight. Nobody's brave enough to stand up and say anything about what's going on out here. And it's rather unfortunate, but I'm going to keep bringing you this content, putting it in your face to make it impossible for you to ignore that action is needed. There is no bloodless revolution. Keep telling you guys. There is no bloodless revolution. It doesn't exist. If you want a revolution, blood must be shed. We live in a world of violence and war constantly. So you cannot afford to be scared. You cannot afford to be a coward. If you want peace, you have to be willing to fight for it. Because you only get peace when you've conquered, when you've won, and people fear you. And as momentary as it may be, you will at least get to enjoy it for a while until somebody tries you again or tests you again. But the current trading relationship we have with the first world country is with the first world makes absolutely no sense. And the more conscientized we become, the more we realize that we need to change these structures because we are being undermined today due to the fact that the trading relationships that we have, the trade relations that we have with first world countries is such that they're allowed to steal raw material from our countries because they've industrialized their countries. They can process these things and then sell them back to us and make us the labor force, which is exactly what we were during apartheid and what we were during slavery. So if we want to change the status quo, it's going to take more than just protesting. Protesting, yes, it does something to spread awareness, but the media can easily muffle that. The media easily suppresses this to make sure that not enough people get to find out and hear about what's going on. Just like my channel right now is being suppressed deliberately and systematically to prevent it from being heard because they don't want the revolution to be started by content creators who are showing and telling the truth. They want the misinformation campaign to continue all around the world. And that's why I ask you, if you do come across this, even if by accident, share this with everybody that you know. And let's spread the fire, guys. All right, that's all for me, guys.